The old days, 2035 AD. Leo stepped into his friend Cristiano's house to find him wearing nothing but a pair of purple elastic fiber briefs, a Hawaiian shirt, flip-flops, and a green PQD bracelet on his left wrist. Cristiano stood about 1.75 m and weighed almost 90 kilos, quite a comical sight in that getup, not to mention the tattoo on his left pec, half hidden by thick curly black hair, depicting a Jolly Roger in the shape of a wild boar's skull. Leo was one of the very few who knew that his friend had tampered with his SQP, including its dietary controls. If anyone from the local health division ever found out and reported him to the Ministry of Health, his friend could lose his healthcare coverage forever. But who would suspect anyone to be crazy enough to do such a thing? To tamper with a quantum processor technology so advanced and inaccessible, one had to possess technical knowledge available to only a handful of specialists specifically trained by the state and kept under constant surveillance. The SQP was a veritable chemical laboratory operating 24 hours a day in parallel with the lymphatic and endocrine systems. Its invention and widespread adoption had triggered a revolution in healthcare, and the Indian technician who had designed it, Bharath Kumar, won the Nobel Prize for Medicine. With the backing of the WHO, in February of 2026, Eddie Gibbon, the CEO of Amazon, made SQP devices available to anyone who explicitly requested one. In the first year of distribution, people from developed countries had to pay the equivalent of €2 to get it. However, installation and activation were granted free of charge to everyone living in developing and third world countries. Thanks to the SQP, the Zika virus, tuberculosis, and malaria were eradicated within 2 years. Winter flu outbreaks stopped claiming victims worldwide, and overpopulation was curbed thanks to the contraceptive function included in the device. By 2035, every child received their SQP directly at daycare. AIDS, degenerative diseases of the nervous system, diabetes, and other genetically transmitted conditions could all be kept under control, making patients' lives almost normal. The economic savings generated by this technological milestone were so enormous as to be nearly incalculable. The multinational pharmaceutical companies now survived only on a few core vaccines: tetanus, measles, chickenpox, and smallpox, whose components could not be synthesized by the SQP from the chemical substances in the human body. People no longer lost their hair or suffered from obesity. The SQP regulated nutrient absorption and managed appetite, preventing food waste and alcoholism. All this came about after the cyber war of the early 2020s, which pitted the Western Bloc against the Islamic State, culminating in the Triennium of Terror. After that dangerous conflict that brought humanity to the brink, thanks to the new prophet Imad al-Harak and the so-called New Call, the world became a more peaceful, healthier place. Gradually, monotheistic religions were significantly downsized by technology and genetics, which had scientifically demonstrated that if God really existed, he was buried in our genes. Priests, imams, rabbis, and monks still had not fully surrendered, but the new generations were no longer willing to be manipulated. The advent of the quantum processor disrupted old beliefs, changing the balance of world power. Only Islam was better able to absorb the shock, thanks precisely to the foresight of the new prophet. After a brief period of adjustment, everyone adapted to the changes. The future slipped in quietly, like an unexpected guest at an old-school reunion. Every human being, whether they liked it or not, was constantly being monitored. Everyone had to give up, voluntarily or otherwise, their freedom to be untraceable. The exponentially growing security needs of the 2020s had made that voluntary surrender of freedom far less burdensome than statesmen and sociologists had predicted. Handing your body over to technology became an act of faith for the common good. Even the black market and organized crime were dealt a severe blow because the SQP could administer the same molecular compounds as the drugs people used to love. The device was effectively employed as therapy against addiction, since it could neutralize the active ingredient in traditional drugs, making them essentially a pointless expense. As for recreational use of the SQP, which required special software loaded into the PQD, some people, of course, took it way beyond reasonable limits, and the device could neither process nor compensate for the excess dopamine and endorphins. Those who were labeled addicts overused the substances linked to sensory pleasure and suffered recurring crises whose main effects were sleep disorders and cataplexy. Big Brother Orwell had finally laid hands on the world, but his embrace was benevolent and democratic. When the SQP was first introduced, someone called it the happiness cube, the biggest IT revolution since the iPhone. Those who disagreed with that assessment formed small communities detached from the globalized world and kept their distance from using the device. They were forced to organize a parallel system for communication, currency, and healthcare. Objecting to the installation of the SQP for oneself or one's children meant being cut off from the world. Without the subcutaneous quantum processor and the optional external PQD interface, people lived like outcasts, excluded from the global network and unable to carry out instant financial transactions, relinquishing real-time communication and automatic medical care. To live in global society, you had to have an SQP with the latest version of My Friend. Otherwise, you were classified as an objector and regarded by the rest of the world as a self-centered eccentric. By 2035, the only real international problems were the cyber resistance front, the Pastafarian pirate commando, global warming, and the worst of all, pollution. Neither the FRC nor the CPP posed a threat on the level of the terrorists of the early 21st century, but through the ATIS, world governments secretly nurtured them to monitor and channel deviance, keeping it under constant control. Cristiano was part of the CPP and served as the main cell leader in the Massacrora province. Authorities likely knew of his subversive activities but turned a blind eye because his contribution to preserving forested areas was substantial. The thermal detection drones he kept perfecting were able to locate fires in their early stages and could intervene with a blast of liquid hydrogen, responding promptly and effectively to a European standard. Over the last 3 years of activity, Cristiano had managed to get 4 arsonists arrested, yet despite that, he considered himself a true pirate. He was a huge fan of the old manga One Piece and had his own unique sense of morality and honor, largely derived from both that series and Bushido. "What'll you drink?" Cristiano asked Leo, who had settled on the couch facing the large window, from which there was a broad view of the Magra River Valley. "Got any of your juices?" "Unfortunately not. Your choices are mead or craft beer. Give me some mineral water, thanks." "Still at war with alcohol? You know, I'm not sure it's a good idea having you here. My grandfather always said you couldn't trust anyone who didn't drink. Then go get your propellers printed by some alcoholic. There's a world of difference between accepting the craft beer I make and being an alcoholic, my dear Pantani from Kerola. Pantani would never have used an electric rack railway. Don't blaspheme. Whatever Pantani did isn't my concern. Mineralized rainwater okay for you? Thanks, and when you're done with the irrelevant jibes, could you also offer me something to eat, please? I didn't have breakfast." Cristiano came back from the kitchen with a pitcher of water and some cookies. Sitting down next to his friend, he said loudly, "Sweetheart, can you come here?" "Be right there, honey," chirped a woman's voice from somewhere in the house. A few seconds later, Leo caught a whiff of cinnamon and chestnut honey. Then Edwige Fenwick appeared, dressed in a pink and black baby doll, thigh-high stockings, and sandals. Naturally, she didn't have the pink glow that all female HOLOs were legally required to have. "I love the old days," Leonardo said. "Hi, Leo. Great to see you, you're looking good," Edwige trilled, giving them both a mischievous smile as she swayed her hips for their enjoyment. "Edwige, please send Leo the blueprint of the propeller Gianni Caproni and I worked on," Cristiano requested. "Already done, sweetie," she informed him, placing her hands on her hips and leaning forward to give the 2 onlookers a generous view of her cleavage. "Thanks," the guys said almost in unison. And she took her leave, saying, "I'm going to sunbathe on the terrace. Call me if you need me." They both couldn't help but follow her with their eyes as she climbed the wooden stairs, disappearing gradually as her image slipped out of their field of vision, leaving behind a scent of lemon and cypress. "Since the last time I saw her, I can tell you've made remarkable progress with her personality," Leo said. "I worked on a Lamu sample mix with some of her more carefully selected films. I got rid of stuff like Ubalda, all naked and warm, or Giovanona long thigh. I should mention I also added a good 15% of Rita Levi Montalcini. What? I need her help with my work too. So why not just use Ms. Montalcini directly?" Leo joked. "Look, instead of prattling on, why don't you tell me when you can finish those 30 pieces I need tested? Would the day after tomorrow be okay? Leo asked, taking a sip of the cold water. What time? These cookies are good. I'll bring them when I go down to Pontremoli, if that works for you. I've been asked to do a quote for a renovation, and I must be there by 10 in the morning, so I'll drop by around 9. Maybe you can invite me for breakfast? Gladly. Hey, Leo, you seem off, what's going on? I slept at Valentina's last night. She started leaving Martina with the holo nanny for a while now, so we finally got to spend the night together in the control cabin. What model did she download for the nanny? Galadriel. Oh, I just love Kate Blanchett. At that age, she was fantastic, but... Yeah, me too, but with that aura, she loses all her charm, you know, and the pink glow makes her look like a piece of candy. Thanks for putting that image in my head. I'm downloading it right away and cracking it so there's no aura. Then I'll give her the personality of Sora Lella, with 20% Susanna Camuso, and just wait and see. Who's Susanna Camuso? Leo asked. She was a CGIL union leader, served as general secretary until 2019 or 2020, I think. Was she good looking? Not exactly, but she was ornery and rough around the edges. You know how I love contrasts. Oh, I'm well aware.